7:30 in the evening here. Yesterday, about 4 o'clock, we saw that Red Cross convoy leave Gaza, southern Gaza, enter Egypt, and those hostages, after having medical tests, be handed over to the IDF. We were expecting things to more or less operate in the same way, but we have seen this delay. So let's get more on this from Mark Regev, who's a senior advisor to the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He joins me live now. Mr. Regev, this is somewhat of a worrying development that's emerged in the last hour. Of course, we know that these sorts of deals are incredibly fragile, especially a truce like this that is multi-dayed and involves the release of several dozen hostages. But everything seemed to go according to plan today. We then got news from Israeli media that they had been released, and then suddenly this latest news.
So obviously there's a lot of disinformation around. The most important thing is Hamas has made a commitment, and on the basis of that commitment, we've agreed to a 4-day humanitarian pause. And over those 4 days, 50 people have to be released. That has been agreed. And with the people released yesterday, the 13, that means there's another 37 that still must be released. And that is Hamas's obligation. Now, as much as I can feel the pain of the families who wanted to see their loved ones already on Israeli soil, I'd remind them that yesterday there was also a delay. Maybe today there's less excuses for a Hamas delay because they've had 2 days of a ceasefire now, yes? And so they can't say, well, they're more difficult. It should have been easier today. But I think when dealing with a group like Hamas, we need nerves of steel. We know that they will, if they can stress people on our side a bit longer, they'll try to do so. But they have that commitment. The humanitarian pause is based on that commitment, and they are obligated to release our people.
Mr. Regev, as we reported, the Red Crescent says that the aid convoys did reach northern Gaza today. Can you confirm that?
From our perspective, there were, according to the understandings, that is, of course, part of the understandings. There's supposed to be a beefing up of the humanitarian aid to Gaza during this humanitarian pause. That's one of the reasons that there is a humanitarian pause, to get our people out and to get humanitarian aid to the civilian population of Gaza. That's the whole point.
Israeli media is also, they've been reporting in the last hour or so that security sources say that if the hostages aren't released by midnight tonight, operations may resume in the Gaza Strip. Is this something that's being discussed at present?
Once again, I can only say the following, and to repeat, which is obvious. Hamas made commitments. On the basis of those commitments, there is a humanitarian pause. If Hamas does not keep its obligations under the understandings reached, so there's question marks are going to be raised. But I won't say more at this stage.
We also saw a Qatari delegation arrive here in Israel today, obviously quite a significant thing, and Qatar has been central to these negotiations. And there were reports emerging that perhaps there were discussions around extending this 4-day truce for longer. Can you give us any details around what was discussed with the Qataris today?
I cannot, but I can say the following. We've agreed that we are prepared, and we've said so publicly, and that's our commitment as a government, as the government of Israel, is that after the release of the 50 hostages over 4 days, we are willing to extend the humanitarian pause for an additional day for 10 additional hostages for them to be released, and that can follow for another day and another day, each day, getting a release of hostages. Ultimately, that's what we want. We want to get our people out. That is one of the major goals of our military operation. I'd remind you that Hamas was holding some 32 children. Yesterday, they released 4. According to my math, that means there are 28 children still being held by Hamas. The youngest, as you know, is only 10 months old. He was kidnapped at the age of 9. He turned 10 in Hamas captivity. And I think this should remind us all what we're dealing with, or who we're dealing with. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. Who else abducts, kidnaps, takes hostage a 9-month-old baby. I mean, the poor child hadn't yet walked or talked, and yet he's already a hostage.
And we saw quite moving images today of some of the family members being reunited, the 9-year-old boy being reunited with his family, and a real anxious wait for all the other families who are waiting to see what happens next, but also an anxious wait for the people of Gaza who have received some respite as a result of this truce. There is, Mr. Regev, and we're showing our viewers that moment where the young boy was reunited with his family today following his release. But there is growing calls as well, Mr. Regev, from the international community for this ceasefire to be extended and turn into a permanent truce. Pressure coming regionally from countries like Qatar, who have been central. They have said the humanitarian situation is unacceptable. What sort of conversations have been had around that? Because in many ways that pressure is being built and Israel is being asked to look at extending this and turning it into something more permanent.
So we've said we're prepared to extend the ceasefire, and we just say, so continue releasing hostages, 10 a day, and you'll get a day extra humanitarian pause. I think it's very clear. Hamas has agreed to 4 days.
But beyond that point?
Beyond that point, until the very last hostage is released. Yes, until the very last hostage is released. That would take a while, and I think everywhere, if Hamas is willing to play that game, we're happy to go down that route. We've said it publicly. Every day, extra day, is 10 hostages released. We won't allow Hamas to play games on that issue. But I should remind you, and I'm not telling you something you or the viewers don't know, that our goal in the operation is to bring about a strategic change in the Gaza Strip to remove Hamas from power and to destroy their military machine. That is our long-term goal. That remains our war aim, together with the release of hostages.
Well, you've had allies criticize this operation. Just today we had the Spanish Prime Minister, the Belgian Prime Minister. A few weeks ago we had the French President even say that these operations, the way in which it's going, is unacceptable because of the humanitarian toll. How would you respond to them? Because we did have criticism from the Spanish Prime Minister and the Belgian Prime Minister today.
Yes, I was in the meeting when they met the Prime Minister last week. I should say not last week, just a few days ago. But those calls have been there. But I think anyone who saw the press conference yesterday with President Biden and knows the positions of major governments in Europe, whether it's the German government, whether it's the British government, others, knows that there's a common understanding that we can't go back to the status quo of before October 7th. That is Hamas in power of the Gaza Strip, with a very dangerous military machine. And let's be frank, Israelis simply will not stand to go back to that reality, because that reality means that Israel lives next to this terror enclave, and Israelis have to live in constant fear that in the middle of the night, terrorists will cross the frontier and butcher their children. No one should have to live that way, and Israelis definitely shouldn't have to live that way. And so the goal is to take apart Hamas's military machine, and to remove it from power. But ultimately, as we've said before, that's also good for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this regime that's been in power for 16 years in the Gaza Strip. And I'd ask you, what has it brought the people of Gaza? What positive thing can Hamas say it has brought the people of Gaza besides poverty and bloodshed and misery? Name one positive thing they've done for the people of Gaza.
Well, Mr. Regev, we're watching these developments this evening, and we're hoping that this truce will continue and those hostages will be released, including the respite for the 1.72 million people of Gaza who are relying on this truce as well. Mark Regev, thank you so much for joining us. Well, as we said, we are following the developments very closely here from Israel. But for now, back to you, Jonathan, at Sky News Centre.